comes, the Haggadah comes to the is that the Haggadah comes to the 10 plagues, and it says these are the 10 plagues, Eulain, these are the 10 plagues, and it lists the 10 plagues, and it says each time that you're supposed to list the 10 plagues, you're supposed to pour a little bit from the cup. We'll see that. And it lists the 10 plagues: Dam, Svardeya, Kinim, Arov, Dever, Shlin, Barad, Arbe, Choshach, Makos, Bechoros. First of all, let me just go over this with everybody so everybody makes sure we know what these are. These are the essential things. What is Dam? That is, what's the Dam? Blood. What does that mean? All the waters of Egypt turned into blood, and they couldn't drink from them. And what happened to the fish? The fish died. The fish in the river, the fish in the Nile died. What's the second plague? Oh, yours says crocodiles. Oh, that's interesting because there's a dispute between what exactly most commentaries say Tzivardeh is a frog. But how is that a plague? So some say it's crocodile. And they went into all of the dough, the ovens, the rooms. Okay, then the third is kinim. Kinim is that what is kinim? Lice. The lice was on the humans and the animals. What's the fourth plague? Arov. So arov is basically means a mixture. So what happened here was that the wild animals and the snakes and the scorpions came into their houses. What's the next plague? Dever. What's Dever? Dever is the plague of death on the cattle, on the horses, and the donkeys, etc. They all died. Then what's the sixth plague? This is that like some sort of skin disease on humans and animals. And what's the next plague? Baran, hail. A very heavy hail accompanied by thunder and lightning came down upon them, and it hit was remaining in the field and the animals, whatever was left. And then the eighth plague is locusts. And then the ninth plague was this very heavy, thick darkness. And then the 10th plague was that all the firstborn of the humans and the animals died. So when we mention these plagues, the custom is to spill a little bit from the cup. Always intriguing me. Why are we spilling a little bit from the cup? Anybody know? So, let's see what it is. Hold on 1 second. Hold on. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. All right, hold on 1 second. Um, Hold on 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay, so how okay. Oh wait, I have to go back to the beginning of it. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Oh, they don't have a discussion, and I'm shocked. Maybe I can't see it. Anyway, then after that, it says Rabbi Yehuda hayanose me'em simonim. Rabbi Yehuda would give away a mnemonic to remember this. And what's the mnemonic? The mnemonic was Titzach Adash Ba'achav, which are basically the mnemonic to remember it. So what's Rabbi Yehuda adding to this discussion by remembering like that? So the commentary that's attributed to Rashi, it's called Miyuchas Rashi, explains that were it not for this mnemonic, we would say that since there's no order in Muktam Mucha Torah, there's no order in the Torah, and so therefore we didn't know that they necessarily came in this specific manner. And so therefore Rabbi Yehuda gave Simanim to show that they came specifically in this order. The Rashbats explains that he did it to remind the students that this was the order so that they don't make a mistake, a way of remembering it. Another explanation is that Tzach refers to the makos that come from the ground. Adash are the ones that came from basically just by chance. And Uva'achav, that's the ones that came from the air. And so he combines the makos b'chos with the ach to tell us that there's nothing like the ach. There's nothing like it. Anyway, so that's why Rabbi Yehuda had this discussion. That's one approach. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yakar, we said his answer. Another explanation of why this you're going to like that. Why did Rabbi Yehuda teach us how to say it in a short manner? Because before there was Twitter, where everybody tries to say something as briefly as possible, the Gemara in Pesachim says, you have to say something in the shortest way as possible. And so therefore, he wants to teach how you say it in the shortest way possible. Okay. Some say, I'll give one more explanation, that Rabbi Yehuda divided up because the third one of each one had no warning. And so that's to show like why it was different, because each third one, they showed that they were set. There's a lot of different explanations. Okay, now I wanted to just, before we go to discussing one of the songs, if we have the time, I want to say, how do you make the blessing on the matzah at the Seder? How do you make the blessing on the matzah at the Seder? So what's the question? What's the question? Meaning to say, what are the possibilities? You have 3 matzahs in front of you. 2 are whole and 1 is broken. So how do you make the matzah on the, which do you hold in your hand when you take the matzahs? So you're saying you take the 2 whole ones. Any other possibilities? So I'll read to you what they say, and then we'll have a discussion about it in more detail in the commentary. But it's actually a very, very complicated question. So let me read to you what the instructions in this Haggadah is, and then hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on, I gotta get it. Okay. Here we go. So the Gemara tells us, and then I'll read you the instructions. The Gemara tells us that you bring in front of the Seder, whole pieces. And he said you bring whole pieces and broken pieces. If you will find a pesisin, which are broken pieces, ushleimin, and whole pieces. And says Rav Huna, mevarach al pesisin, you make the bracha on the broken ones, and by doing that, you no longer have to make a bracha on the whole ones. And Rabbi Yochanan says, no, to make a bracha on the whole ones is the ideal mitzvah. And so then Rav Papa says, everybody admits, Hakol modim, that bepesach, sheminiach prusa betoch shlema ubotzea. Everybody says on Pesach that you take the broken one and stick it into the whole one and make the blessing. What's the reasoning? Because matzah is called bread of a oni, lechem oni, bread of a poor man. And so therefore, it's a special law by matzah to make a bracha on the broken piece, and not the whole piece. And so therefore, by Pesach, Papa says, everybody says you put the broken piece into the whole piece, and then both of them are in his hand. So how many matzos are there? Does this Gemara assume how many matzos are there at this point? Where do you see 3? Where do you see 2.5? It says, Meniach es aprusa betoch hashlema. You take the broken one and put it in the whole one. Where do you see 3? What? That's what it says. It says you take a broken one and you stick it in the whole one. You can't read backwards. I'm just saying this is what they say in the Gemara, like the original text says you take a broken piece and put it into the whole piece. But now we have an issue. We have, how many brachos are you making with the matzah? Right, very good. You make a bracha on hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and you also make the bracha al achilas matzah. So you have the bracha on eating the matzah, and you also have the bracha on hamotzi. Now, there's a separate law of hamotzi. Now, what are you supposed to do with hamotzi on every Friday night? You're supposed to do, how many loaves of challah do you have? 2. So therefore, Rashi and Rashbam and Tosfos are of the position that you make hamotzi all of a sudden, even though the Gemara doesn't say anything about this, you make hamotzi on 2 whole pieces of matzah, and then you make the blessing of the matzah on the broken piece. So how do you do that? You pick up the 2 whole loaves, and then what do? Do you put them down? How do you get to the broken piece from that? So we'll have to see what it says here. The Rosh and the Mordechai say that you make hamotzi on the first one and achilas matzah on the broken one. But then Tosfos says no. Also, hamotzi you need a break on the broken one, because that's what Rav Papa says. You take the broken one and stick it into the whole one because it's called lechem oni, meaning to say also the motzi, according to Tosfos and Psachim, needs to be on the broken one. And so too the Ritva, writing in Spain, says that since you're saying al achilas matzah, it's lechem oni, and so therefore you have to do it on the broken one. The Rif and the Rambam say, how many matzos do you need according to the Rambam? How many matzos does the Rambam say you need? So basically in Ashkenaz, because they were worried about having lechem mishnah, they said you have to have 2.5 matzos. So you have to have 2.5 matzos. And then after that, it got, the idea developed that you need 3, and then you break it and use the afikomen. But the Rambam didn't have that concern. So he says that you don't need 3 matzos, but rather he says it's sufficient to have 1 broken and 1 whole. But he doesn't say which one you should make the bracha on. And so therefore, the Torah says that you make a motzi and matzah on the broken one. And what do you do with the whole one? You use that for korech. So too the Or Zarua says you only need 2 matzos. So basically this is a huge dispute. Then, which one do you eat from? So this is what the Mariel customs. The Mariel, writing in Germany in the 15th century, he writes that when you make that motzi, so this is the Ashkenazic practice, because when you make that motzi, you hold 3 matzos, i.e. the 2 whole and the 1 broken. The 2 whole because of lechem mishnah, and the one broken because of what's called lechem oni. And then you take the broken one between the two whole ones. And then after you make that motzi, then you drop the third matzah and you hold the top one and the broken one and you say hamotzi. So basically what you're supposed to do is the following. You take the 2.5 matzahs together, you hold them and you make what bracha? Hamotzi lechem and art, so that you could have lechem mishnah. Then you just gently put down the bottom one, and now you only have 1.5, and you make the bracha of al achilat matzah on the broken one. And so that's the actual practice. That's the practice. Now the whole point here is, why is it so important? Because the matzah has to be made on a broken piece. Because matzah has to be made on brokenness. The brokenness in our life. What are you eating there, Kobe?
Eating the corporate.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right. So now I just wanted to go over that idea of how you make the matzah, how you make the blessing on the matzah. What about, okay, just ask this last one. Let's say you only have 3 matzos for the 2 nights. That's all you got. So what should you do? So if you only have 3 matzos for the 2 nights, then the Even HaYarchi writes that you should make hamotzi on the achilas matzah, and you break the broken one alone, and then you eat it. And then the korach you make from the broken one. You don't touch the whole one. So you should always have 2 whole ones for the second night. Okay. Anyway, that was just some of that. I just wanted to make sure everybody knows the proper dance for the blessing over the matzah. So now, with the little time that we have left, what I wanted to do is go to the song. There's a lot of discussion about this song, the song Gadya. Usually by the time you get to that point, most people are done. They're, wow. This one has Yiddish song at the end. So Haggadah. So what's the source of Haggadah? Does anybody know where it's from? Anybody know where it's from? So anybody know who wrote Haggadah? So the Haggadah is a mystery. It's a mystery. Thus, we don't know. In the Haggadah of Marba L'Saper, he says that the source for it is in the base medrash of Rabbi Eliezer of Worms, also known as the Rokeach or the perfumer, and that's what he claims is the source. The only issue is it's not found in any work we have of the Rokeach or in any other contemporary Ashkenazic works to the Rokeach. So we don't know. So that there's no evidence of that. So the Yavitch, Rabbi Yaakov Emden says that we don't, that he said, the Yavitch, Rabbi Yaakov Emden says we don't know who wrote this song, but it's an ancient song and we don't know who wrote it. So that's probably the most famous Pesach song. We have no idea who wrote it. Could have been just like somebody sitting around on one Pesach, playing around on our Pesach. In the shoot, in the Shelos HaTshuvos, the Shoot Chaim, he asked the Chidah that there was one person who was making fun of people who were saying this song. And he was laughing, he's saying it's a silly song. He said, if you say that, he said, we should excommunicate that person who claims it's a silly song. And we should fine him and make him pay a penalty. And furthermore, he says, this song is so important and it speaks to an eternal truth. And so there is this idea that it's a deeply spiritual song. The Yavitz explains that what's the reason it's so interesting that the Seder starts in Aramaic and it ends in Aramaic. That's to emphasize that was the language of the vernacular. the language of the people. So you're supposed to start in a language people understand and finish in a language people understand. Means the two most important parts, the beginning and the end, have to be in the language of the people. And so therefore, you're supposed to understand it. The Chasam Sofer also says that since, according to him, the whole poem is a lament on that which we lost today because of our great sin, the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, he views this whole song as a lament for the absence of the Paschal Lamb, that we end the Seder by lamenting its absence. Therefore, we use the language of the people. What's the reason why this piyut is said on the night of the Seder? So we've already seen the explanation of the Chasam Sofer, that this was a lament for the Korban Pesach, but there are other answers. The Tashbetz writes that he wrote it as a parable so that everybody will see it and will be shocked and will come to try and understand and to evoke conversation about Egypt. And so that's why it's specifically on this night. Some say that this was an attack against the idolaters who worship all types of idols and the Egyptians who worship a goat. And we say, why? And we say to them, why don't you worship a different? Why are you worshiping the goat? You should worship something else. So there's a lot of explanations about it. And the one commentary says he heard from the Magidei Emes that there was someone in his generation who did more than 10 explanations on this piyut. And he says it's for sure something that should be taken seriously. Many people have written a lot on it. Okay. Most of them see this as a lament over the long exile that we're still in, but some said other ways. But anyway, this is not just a simple song. The rabbis have seen this as a lament of great meaning. So, do you have an explanation for Rabbi Steinsaltz? What he doesn't care.
Do we know when this came in about the Middle Ages?
Well, that's what we were saying. We don't know the source for it. We don't. So it's not mentioned in the medieval period. That's what I was saying. It's not mentioned. I mean, medieval is a word you don't know, but it's not mentioned in what we call the Rishonim of Ashkenaz, even though they tried to attribute it to Rabbi Eliezer of Worms. But there's Seth Oper. Rena Oper has at the Museum of the Bible a printed, a book, a codex of the Haggadah going back to like the 7th century. No, it's not. I don't believe so. They're saying that there's no source for it. I didn't check that. We could ask Rena. She's not on today. Seth's not on the call, but I don't believe it has Gadya.